Welcome to Kumbasoft DPAA tutorials. This tutorial is about deleting objects in your DataPower appliances using DPAA. So be sure to set your video playback to high definition, and though some visual details may have changed since this video was created, the functionality will still be the same. So we started up DPAA. We've got a couple of appliances selected, and we have a domain selected where we're going to be running this functionality. And I've selected an object type of multi-protocol gateway, and I've already searched for the multi-protocol gateway that we're going to want to delete. And this is just going to be an example of, hey, what if I want to delete a service object? You can delete any kind of object, but what if I want to delete something like a service? And this is going to be pretty comprehensive as a result. So I'm going to go select these two services here, and I can either use a right mouse click or I can use a hamburger menu, and I can select delete selected objects. So what DPAA is going to do is it's going to present us with a wizard that allows us to delete the objects we selected. Now, this wizard lets us do cascading deletes and some other things, but first I want to show you what's going to happen if you don't do that. That is, what is the simple and easy way through this? So I can select next. I'll explain this screen a little bit later. I'm going to select next. And then what DPAA is doing is DPAA is basically saying, hey, the two objects or whatever objects you selected, it could have been 2, it could have been 20, that's all the objects that's going to be listed here. You're about to see a major difference between the two when you start looking at what happens when we cascade delete. Now, what synchronized delete choices will do for you is you can veto any object deletions here that you want. So if I select this button here to say I don't want to delete that, it deselects the other one of the same name. In other words, it's saying, hey, if you don't want to delete this one of this type in this domain, you probably don't want to delete that one of this type in this domain. So that's what synchronized delete choices does. Now, if I turn this button off and I select just this one, you'll notice I can still delete that one. So I have choices here. I have the option to either synchronize those actions or not. Now, some other things that I can do is before I delete things, I can save everything and export it before we get out of here. So to show you an example of that, what it's going to do is it's going to, it can save the exported objects, and I can do something else, which we'll explain here in a moment. So I'm going to back up a couple of times, and I'm going to select Cascade Deletes and Delete Reference Files. So this is another option we have when we're doing the cascade, is we have the option to delete the files that's being referenced by the objects that's within the cascade. So now I'm going to select next. This window provides us an exclusion list, basically a delete exception list to say don't delete these things ever. So this list is saved into your system, your DPAA configurations, as you build it up, and you only have to build it up once, and it's fairly complicated. So let me show you what we're dealing with here. So if I add a row to this, I get 4 columns. I get an appliance expression, a domain expression, an object type expression, and an object name expression. Let's show a really good example of what we might do here. So all of these are regular expressions, and as I go through this, you can see that DPAA defaults the field to a dot star. That's a regular expression. And then the final thing would be object name. Now, if I leave it like this, basically we're saying we don't want anything to be automatically selected for delete. We want nothing to be automatically selected for delete. Generally not what we want to do. But let's give us a good example here. Let's say we never want to delete any file that's in the PubCert directory. So in other words, if we're cascading delete files, now I can type the word file here as well. So I can say, I don't want any file that begins with the word PubCert to be removed or default selected for delete. Now, it will still delete it. I can show you, we showed you we can veto things. Well, we can also turn them back on. Let me give you another quick example that we probably never want things deleted from, and I'll go back to typing in file here. And then in this field, we're going to type shared cert. Okay? So there's another example of, we don't want to delete anything there. So you can start seeing how we can build this up, and we can start entering the directories or entering object names and object types, and we can even provide individual appliance exceptions. Maybe you've organized some things in some appliances in one way that you didn't organize into other appliances another way, and you can say, hey, for these appliances, don't mark these, but in these appliances, you can mark these. And you can do the same with domains. You can say, hey, in these domains, it's okay to delete things in share cert, but in those domains, it's not. So you can build this up any way you want to. It's extraordinarily powerful what it does. But let's move on and see what this does right away. So I'm going to select next. And because I've selected Cascading Deletes, what DPAA is doing right now is it's going and finding all the references that are made by the parent objects that I have selected for delete, which in this case was a multi-protocol gateway, which, as you know, can have a lot of references. So what we see now, instead of just 2 objects, we see a whole list of objects here that are saying, oh man, I've got a whole bunch of stuff in here that, we're going to go delete. So and you can see the tree. So you can see that this is one of the objects that we had selected, but it is referencing a style policy that is referenced by the multi-protocol gateway called web server. And the style policy rule is referenced by a style policy called web server policy. You can kind of see how the tree works out. You can see the appliance, the domain, and some other things. But now we're seeing, wait, slow down there. We're seeing some other things in here that, we probably don't want these to be deleted. Now, DPAA will delete these. They're marked for delete. We have the option of saying, okay, I want to veto that. And because of our synchronized delete choices being turned on, if I turn off these 3 by hand here, we can scroll down and we can see these 3 now have also been turned off. Likewise, if I turn them on back here, as we demonstrated earlier, they will be turned back on up here because we're synchronizing the deletes. But there's actually a better way, because we never want these files deleted. So I can just go over here to the top over here, and I can select this little button to add what I have selected to the exception list. Now, to prove that, I'm going to go back once, and I'm going to show you that what it did was it built the regular expression for what you need to protect. So we're saying, hey, store, reject all, store, filter, store, identity. You know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, I probably don't want anything from the store directory removed. So I'm going to, or by default, I don't want it removed. So I'm going to remove these 2 rows. I'm going to change this back to .star. I'm going to leave this as file, and I can leave it any way I want to. So I can leave this as file, and then I can go back here and say, look, if it begins with store, I don't want it removed. So now let's go back and see what happens. By going back into here, notice how DPAA has these unselected by default. And this is what DPAA will now do for any object you want to delete. Right? As I move forward, it'll exempt these. It'll still list them, but it will exempt them. It won't display them for me by default. So I don't have to worry about having to go through this thing and painstakingly go through and try to remember, oh, we don't want that. We don't want this deleted. Let's not accidentally delete that, because DPAA will. There's some other neat things in here that we may want to get rid of. Notice we've got an XML manager, the default XML manager, the default HTTP user agent. Oh man, we probably don't want those to be deleted. But then when I think about it, I'm like, wait a minute. I may not want any object whose name is default to be deleted. So I'm going to go back again to save myself some time. I'm going to add another row here. And do I care about where the appliance? No. Do I care about where in the domain? No. Do I care about the object type? Probably not. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and I'm going to say, okay, anything with the name default. So I'm going to write a regular expression here that allows it to have the word default anywhere in the name. Okay, I'm going to put it in here. Now, I can save this list or I can click next. Either way, the list gets saved. So I'm going to click next. And now you can see that these two objects are no longer selected because they are now part of the exception list. And as I go through here and start looking at other things, I can see some other things that, wait a minute, a message type, there's a message matching, there's some other things in here that I may not want to delete, and I can add those to the delete exceptions just like that. Now, the truth is, as soon as I add them to the delete exceptions, DPAA removes them from the list because DPAA is basically saying, hey, if you were adding them to the exception list, you're probably telling me you don't want to delete them now. Now, likewise, as I go back, here we go again. Well, all messages and any messages, message matching. Okay, let's go back to, I don't care what domain these things are in. I probably want to preserve these regardless of where they belong. So I can put these expressions in here and make them anything I want them to be. Now again, I can save this list or I can click next. So now that I've got it all set up, I can comb through here and decide, is there anything else I want to protect? All my default objects are unselected. All my store files are unselected. Is there anything else I want to protect? And once you decide that you're ready to go, you might also be thinking to yourself, hey, wait a minute, this is a lot of stuff. You know, what if I'm wrong? What if something screws up? What if I miss something? Well, we have the ability to go through here and save and export what we have selected into an export. So I have an export completed. Now, I've got to make this a little bit smaller because of the way it's going to show. I've got to display something to you. So what happened when I did that, when I exported that, within the DPAA installation directory, there's a lot of other directories here, and one of them is called configuration exports. And within the configuration exports directory, what it will do is, because I have objects that are selected from both appliances, and I could have objects selected from a bunch of different domains and so on, what I have here is I have a directory created for each appliance that for which I'm operating on. And then within that directory, I've got a domain name directory for each domain that I'm operating within. And then within there, what I'm going to have is a file created called configuration export. It has a date and a time within it. So what this does is this kind of lets you have that file backup that you want for the different appliances, and they're each individual exports. This is an XML-based export that you can just import right back into the appliance. Now, some things, like always in DataPower, you're not going to have your crypto objects here. So you got to be very, very careful. You may want to go in and add a cert.star for your file to say, hey, don't delete anything from the cert directory either. So that's where it puts these files when it exports those, and then you can easily find them later if you want to. But the reason why we do it that way and we don't ask you where do you want this to be exported is because you could have 10 or 12 appliances, you could have 10 or 12 domains, and generally you're not going to need one file to recover. You're going to need a bunch of files to recover in all those different appliances and domains where you are making the delete. Now, one other thing to note is before we go and delete everything here, the rule of DataPower still applies. That is, if you're trying to delete an object, say this object or this object, that is being referenced by some other object within this domain, within the domain, you know, where you're trying to delete these objects, DPAA has no better ability to delete those objects than you can if you were in DataPower. You're not going to be able to delete them if they're being referenced by somebody else. But what happens here is you can come down here and it deletes this cascading from that down, and so it ensures that the objects that flow down this hierarchy tree can be deleted, and it deletes them in the order that you see here. So DPAA has built that order in such a way that it can delete everything you want to delete. But again, if it's being referenced by something else, it's not going to be able to be deleted. So here we go. We're going through the process of deleting everything that was related to that web server down. But wait a minute. You can see that, wait, match all. There was an object there that can't be deleted. Oh, it's in use by something else. So when we're doing that, you can see there's some strange things that go on because sometimes you have multiple references. So you get this one and you get this error that says, wait, I can't delete that. I can't find the configuration. Well, that's because I deleted it here. It's all in the same domain, but it was referenced multiple times. But some of these things can't be deleted because they're being referenced by other objects. And DataPower is protecting you from that. It's not something that DPAA is necessarily doing for you. So that's kind of good news. You can somewhat rest assured that you don't want that you don't have to worry too much about those things being deleted. But this is an object that you probably want to come back and add to your exception list later to make sure that it's not accidentally deleted or marked for deletion in the future. Once we're done, we get our little diskette that tells us that we have to save the domain and persist the thing. We see that the objects that we selected are marked deleted. We can go and save the configurations at this point, knowing that we made a good backup of them anyway. The configuration saved, and when I now search for the multi-protocol gateway, I have nothing left in this domain because it's all been deleted. So that's deleting objects in a nutshell. I know that was quite a lot, actually. But at the end of the day, you've got a lot of power with one little set of clicks. And once you get that exception list built, you are going to be really happy with this feature because you have the ability to delete anything you want without as much worry about. I would always recommend checking that final screen, but at the end of the day, you're not going to, once you get that exception list built and once you use all the full features and you start making backups right at the last moment, you have everything at your disposal to be able to operate most efficiently and most productively as you possibly can anywhere without having to worry about something accidentally happening that you don't know is going to happen. So, hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Go out to www.kumbasoft.com. Watch all our tutorial videos there. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.